The humid Miami air hung heavy as I, Gideon, tinkered with the engine of my vintage Mustang. 46 years old, a mechanic by trade, grease under my fingernails was as familiar as the lines on my face. My wife, Clementine, a real estate agent known for her radiant smile and killer instinct, was inside, presumably prepping for another showing. We'd been married for 15 years, a seemingly solid partnership built on shared dreams and mutual respect, or so I thought. The first crack in our facade appeared subtly, like a hairline fracture in a pristine windshield. Clementine started working later, attending networking events that stretched into the late hours. Her explanations were vague, her perfume lingered with an unfamiliar musk. I chalked it up to the pressures of her competitive field, the relentless pursuit of the next big deal. I'm not a jealous man by nature. Trust is the bedrock of any relationship, and I believed in Clementine. But a nagging unease began to gnaw at me, a persistent whisper in the back of my mind. So I started paying closer attention. One evening, Clementine claimed she had a client dinner downtown. I decided to surprise her, a spontaneous gesture of affection. I cleaned up, threw on a decent shirt, and headed to the restaurant she'd mentioned, a trendy Italian place called Bella Luna. The hostess, a young woman with bright eyes, recognized Clementine's name instantly. "Ah, yes, Mrs. Morrow. She's already here at a table by the window." My heart skipped a beat. I hadn't told Clementine I was coming. A surge of warmth, of anticipation, coursed through me. I followed the hostess, my footsteps light, and then I saw them, Clementine, her hand resting on the arm of a man I'd never seen before. He was younger, maybe early 30s, with slick-back hair and a confident smirk. They were laughing, their faces close, an intimacy that sent a cold wave crashing over me. I stopped dead in my tracks, the blood draining from my face. The restaurant noise faded into a dull hum. It was like watching a scene from a movie, a nightmare unfolding in slow motion. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't move. I just stood there, paralyzed by disbelief and a searing pain that ripped through my chest. Clementine looked up, her eyes widening in shock. The color drained from her face. The man beside her turned, his expression shifting from amusement to annoyance. "Gideon." Clementine stammered, her voice trembling. "What are you doing here?" I found my voice, a low, guttural growl. "I wanted to surprise my wife. I guess the surprise is on me." The man, emboldened by Clementine's presence, stood up. "Look, pal, I don't know who you are, but you need to leave. This is my husband, Thaddeus," Clementine said, her voice barely a whisper. Thaddeus. The name hit me like a physical blow. So there it was, the confirmation of my worst fears, delivered with brutal efficiency. I didn't say a word. I turned and walked out of the restaurant, the image of Clementine and Thaddeus seared into my memory. The Miami night suddenly felt colder, the air thick with betrayal. I drove home in a daze, the familiar streets of our neighborhood blurring into an indistinguishable mess. I parked the Mustang in the driveway, the engine ticking softly as it cooled down. Inside, the house felt empty, sterile. The scent of Clementine's perfume, once a comforting aroma, now felt like a suffocating reminder of her deceit. I poured myself a stiff drink, the whiskey burning a path down my throat. I sat in the living room, staring blankly at the television, the flickering images offering no solace. I replayed the scene at the restaurant in my mind, over and over again. Clementine's hand on Thaddeus's arm, their laughter, the look of shock on her face when she saw me. Each repetition amplified the pain, the anger, the sense of utter devastation. Sleep was impossible. I tossed and turned in our bed, the empty space beside me a constant reminder of Clementine's absence. I couldn't shake the feeling that my entire life, my entire marriage, had been a lie. The next morning, Clementine returned, her eyes red and swollen. She tried to explain, to apologize, to minimize her actions. But the words were hollow, meaningless. The trust was gone, shattered beyond repair. "It happened, Gideon," she pleaded. "It didn't mean anything, it didn't mean anything," I repeated, my voice laced with disbelief. "You were holding his hand, Clementine, you were laughing with him, you looked happy." She started to cry, a torrent of tears that failed to move me. "I'm so sorry, Gideon, please, can't we work this out?" "There's nothing to work out, Clementine," I said, my voice cold and resolute. "It's over." The following weeks were a blur of lawyers, paperwork, and bitter arguments. The divorce was messy, acrimonious. Clementine fought for everything she could get, her radiant smile replaced by a hardened, calculating expression. I moved out of our house, the house we had built together, the house filled with memories, both real and imagined. I rented a small apartment downtown, a stark, impersonal space that reflected my own emotional emptiness. I threw myself into my work, spending long hours at the garage, losing myself in the familiar rhythm of wrenches and engines. It was a temporary escape, a way to numb the pain, but the nights were the hardest. The silence was deafening, the loneliness crushing. I missed Clementine even after everything. I missed the woman I thought I knew, the woman I had loved with all my heart. One evening, a few months after the divorce was finalized, I received a call from an unfamiliar number. I hesitated before answering, a knot of apprehension tightening in my stomach. "Hello," I said cautiously. "Gideon, it's Thaddeus." Voice on the other end was strained, anxious. "Thaddeus," I repeated, my voice laced with venom. "What do you want? I need your help," he said, his voice cracking. "It's about Clementine." I almost hung up, but something in his voice stopped me. A flicker of curiosity, a morbid fascination. "What about her?" I asked, my voice cold. She's in trouble," Thaddeus said, his voice trembling. "She's been arrested." "Arrested?" I repeated, my mind racing. "What for?" "Fraud," Thaddeus said, his voice barely audible. "She's been accused of defrauding her clients, taking their money and running." I was stunned. Clementine, a fraud. It seemed impossible, yet somehow believable. "And why are you calling me?" I asked, my voice hardening. "Why should I care?" Because she says she was doing it for me," Thaddeus said, his voice filled with despair. "She says she needed the money to pay off my debts." I laughed, a bitter, hollow sound. "So she stole from her clients to bail you out. And now you want my help." "I don't know what to do," Thaddeus said, his voice breaking. "She's facing serious charges. I don't want her to go to prison." I thought for a moment, weighing my options. Clementine had betrayed me, humiliated me, destroyed our marriage. She deserved to suffer the consequences of her actions, but I couldn't deny a flicker of compassion, a residual sense of responsibility. She was still the woman I had once loved, the woman I had promised to protect. "I'll see what I can do," I said finally, my voice resigned. "But I'm not making any promises." I hung up the phone, my mind reeling. I didn't know what to do, where to start. But I knew I couldn't just stand by and watch Clementine destroy herself. I contacted a lawyer, an old friend from high school. I explained the situation, omitting the details of Clementine's affair. He agreed to look into the case to see if there was anything he could do to help. The lawyer discovered that Clementine had indeed been involved in a fraudulent scheme, siphoning money from her clients' accounts into a separate, offshore account. She had used the money to pay off Thaddeus's gambling debts, debts he had accumulated over years of reckless betting. The evidence against her was overwhelming. She was facing multiple counts of fraud, each carrying a potential prison sentence. I visited Clementine in jail. She looked pale, gaunt, her eyes filled with fear and regret. She pleaded with me to help her, to get her out of this mess. "I did it for you, Gideon," she sobbed. "I wanted to give you the life you deserved. You did it for Thaddeus," I said, my voice cold and unwavering. "Don't try to lie to me anymore." She broke down, confessing everything. The affair, the gambling debts, the fraudulent scheme. She had been desperate, she said, blinded by love and fear. I listened in silence, my heart heavy with sadness and disappointment. I couldn't forgive her, not completely. But I couldn't abandon her either. I used my savings, the money we had accumulated together over years of hard work, to hire a top-notch defense attorney. The attorney managed to negotiate a plea bargain, reducing Clementine's sentence in exchange for her full cooperation with the authorities. She was sentenced to 5 years in prison, a harsh but just punishment for her crimes. I visited her regularly, offering her support and encouragement. I didn't love her anymore, but I didn't hate her either. I felt a sense of pity, a lingering connection to the woman I had once shared my life with. Thaddeus disappeared, vanishing without a trace after Clementine's arrest. I suspected he had fled the country, escaping the consequences of his own actions. I never saw him again. Years passed. Clementine served her time, paying her debt to society. When she was released, she contacted me, asking for a second chance. I hesitated. I had moved on with my life. I had found a new sense of peace, a new sense of purpose. I wasn't sure I could open myself up to that kind of pain again, but I also believed in forgiveness, in redemption. Everyone deserves a second chance, even Clementine. I agreed to meet her for coffee. We talked for hours, catching up on each other's lives. She seemed genuinely remorseful, humbled by her experiences. I didn't take her back. I couldn't. The trust was still broken, the scars too deep. But I offered her my friendship, my support. We remained friends, a strange and unconventional relationship forged in the fires of betrayal and forgiveness. I never remarried. I never found another love to replace Clementine. But I learned a valuable lesson about trust, about forgiveness, about the resilience of the human spirit. Life is full of surprises, both good and bad. Sometimes, the people we love the most are the ones who hurt us the deepest. But it's how we respond to those betrayals that defines us, that shapes our character. I chose forgiveness. I chose compassion. I chose to move on, to rebuild my life from the ashes of my shattered dreams. And in the end, that was enough.